Oh, you've returned. Well, good, because you're right in time for another exciting installment of Journalism with Mr. Karl. Let's talk about writing a feature article. Just 1 second. So feature articles. You're going to really love this one. So what is a feature article? Feature articles are soft news, right? We've talked about hard news. That's that up to the minute hard-hitting news that goes out of style or out of date after a couple reads. So if we look up here, the features of soft news, the purpose of a feature article is to entertain, inform, or persuade. Right? So it's not that it's not important, it's just not that up to the minute kind of thing. So feature articles have a more general focus than hard news articles and don't go out of date after one day. Feature article news topics are these you can decide. Lady Gaga's meat dress. Could that be something I could read about 5 weeks after it happened? Graffiti in New York City. Or Superstorm Sandy. So depending on how these are presented, or what's presented about them, they can, they might fall in the category of a feature news, or they might fall in the category of hard news. There are essentially two types of news. We just sort of looked at them. The first is hard news, the second is soft news. So what is the difference? Hard news, gas prices are going up again. Rash of murders in 2-mile radius. School bus driver gets DUI, and then here's the other one, a day in the life of an Iraqi soldier. So the question becomes, are these are hard news, right? Gas prices go up and down. A week from now, the price might be irrelevant. A rash of murders in a 2-mile radius. That might be, if you miss that one, you might be in trouble. Soft news. A child that saves 4 puppies from drowning. A town's history, a person getting an award. Will these maybe go out of date or not? So if you're thinking now, if you're coming up with a definition for hard or soft news, what would you say? I'll leave that up to you. So you might have figured it out, right? Hard news is up to the minute, time-sensitive information. It is typically more urgent than soft news. Soft news or features are less time-sensitive, do not go out of date after they are published. Right? Feature writing breaks out, and so we're talking about feature articles now in the soft news style. So feature article, it breaks out of the hard news format. And we just talked about that. It allows the reporters to work on a larger canvas with richer resources. So what does that mean? This means you can develop the story over time. Research the topic, tie the sources together, and sort of create a more nuanced story. It allows reporters, what else? It also gives journalists more freedom of language and the ability to explore more issues from a greater number of sources, right? So what do I mean by freedom of language? You can really get, you can use your more figurative language here. You can create more of a picture, whereas a hard news article, you're delivering facts. Maybe you set the scene with some information about the setting, and that can be a little bit of a little bit more descriptive, but realistically, you don't delve into the figurative language all that much. News features. They're pieced together a chronology of events with an emphasis on deaths and injuries, the suspect, and the actions of the authorities, right? So those are news features. They could be a profile, a feature that's a profile on the subject and the key people who were there, right? So these are different kinds of features articles. Human interest story on victims, the hospital staff, police, witnesses. So these are all sort of falling into, obviously you could do human interest story on anything that brings a human face to something that's happening in the world. Historical features on Port Arthur or on previous massacres. Obviously, some of these are a little macabre. They don't have to focus on these things, but investigative features too, based on why of the massacre. So you can look at these different ideas, and these sort of all follow in the same vein, but it just depends on what the focus of your feature is going to be. But realistically speaking, for our school newspaper, a feature article is going to take one subject and develop an article based on that subject and who that subject or what that subject is. So it's not the same as a news article, which just sort of covers the facts, but this develops a story about something that you think you want to highlight. Features are written in the active voice, right? Short paragraphs in the newspaper, in the regular newspaper, but in our school newspaper, it can obviously be a little bit longer because we're not subject to the same space requirements. They use emotive and descriptive languages. The personality and the flavor and the style of the author comes through more. Right? You can pick your precise and colorful words and present. And the present tense works best. So what are we talking about, the active voice? Well, here's a little video.
Created using Powtoon.
Wow, wasn't that just exhilarating? So you get the idea with active versus passive voice, and feature articles are best written in the active voice. So here we go. Buckle your seatbelts because this is gonna take a little bit. A successful feature article has a catchy headline, just like a hard news article, grabs the audience's attention and persuades them to read on. Highlights the main ideas of the article, right? It can be a little bit less sort of urgent as a hard news article, so you can sort of develop it a little bit more. But the same thing, right? You're grabbing the reader's attention. It's got the byline that might expand on the title a little bit more, and it tells the author, or tells who wrote the article, right? So by byline expanding on the title, we're really talking about maybe a drop heading, right? That just gives a little bit more information based on what the headline is. Obviously, this would go before the headline. Or the lead. This is the most important part of the feature Excuse me. One moment. Did I just say the byline would go before the headline? Reverse that. Headline grabs the reader's attention. You've got a drop or subhead, which gives a little bit more, expands on the idea a little bit more, then tells who wrote the article. Let me get that straight. The lead, right? The introduction. This is obviously the most important part of the feature article, and there are different types of leads. So we can start with the question leads. Pose a question to your reader. They must read on if they want to find out the answer. For example, how many of you would have the courage to enter an inferno, right? So that's an interesting way to start your lead. Would you change your mind if your child was inside? So there you go. Now they've upped the stakes, right? So that's a question lead. I need to read on to see what they're talking about or how this continues. Quotation lead. This could have been a disaster, said Fire Chief John Doe. I don't advocate going into burning buildings, but if she hadn't gone into the inferno, we'd be lining up body bags right now. So obviously this quote from the chief or from someone who who's intimately involved in the story that you're featuring grabs the attention of the reader. Of course, you want it to be a quote that's going to do just that. Anecdote lead uses a short account of humor or a humorous experience. For example, sweat dripping off my face. My new shirt was torn. I was breathing hard. At age 10, I had just won my first fight. What? What's happening now, right? So that's a short story to an anecdote that grabs the reader's attention and asks them basically to read further. Descriptive lead. This focuses on what it feels like to be at an event by highlighting sights, smells, etc., evoking clear images. So that's where you could use imagery, right? So we're getting the reader involved, right? This is what it smelled like. This is what it felt like. This is what the crowd sounded like. So you're bringing the reader into what's happening. More leads. Quick burst leads, a series of short, direct statements. Surprise lead, an opening with opposites or differences, right? So we're opening in a way that we're offering two perspectives. Contrast lead, an opening with suspense lead, an open-ended beginning. And then here, contrast lead, an opening with opposites or differences. Surprise lead and contrast lead seem to be very similar. So here's quick burst. It seems innocent. Kids chat, make plans, communicate. They share photos with friends. They have a lot of friends. They also have a lot of new friends wanting to have a chat. New friends ask a lot of personal questions, right? Surprise lead. Sally is 14 years old. She lives in the suburban Brisbane and goes to a wealthy private girls' school. Sally's father is a doctor. Her mother is a lawyer with one of Queensland's major firms. Last year, Sally met a man in a local park and was brutally raped. Ooh, there's the surprise, right? So it's opening with, here's how her life was great, and then all of a sudden, this is the opposite, right? This is, life became terrible. She met a man on the internet. So that's how a surprise lead starts out, opening with something that seems very good, very nice, and then bang, there's the opposite, right? Suspense lead. It's late. The parents have gone to bed. In the front room, the computer screen glows, and a 13-year-old girl is, chatting. She's talking to a stranger. So suspense lead. What's going to happen? Right? Is something bad going to happen? Contrast lead. Sort of similar to surprise lead. Yesterday, a child Yesterday, childhood was an innocent adventure. Kids were brought up in the caring and protected environments of their homes and communities. Today, however, under the noses of parents, children invite predators, deviants, and the sick-minded straight into their bedrooms. Right. So again, right, sort of opposites or opposing ideas with the contrast lead. This is how it used to be. This is how it is now. So different than the surprise lead, which is bang, this is a surprise at what just happened after we talked about how great her life was. But the contrast lead starts with how, here's a contrast between how things were and how they are now. You can think about which was your most effective and why, and that's based largely on what you want to get across in your article. So next, structure. We've seen the inverted pyramid style of writing in a hard news article. A second form is the diamond format. There's some key differences, right? The inverted pyramid and the diamond structure right? The difference is the diamond allows room for historical perspective in the article. So if we look at a little diagram here, this was the inverted pyramid, and we've got sort of the most important, the W's and the H here, so that basically all the information you need to know is right in the lead. Then it goes down, and then this is sort of the end, less important, least important. And then that obviously makes this most important information for the news article to exist, right? That was, we talked about the historical reason when journalists were sending information via telegraphs. A lot of times they wouldn't come through right, so if they got the most important stuff first, then they knew that the most important part of the article was there, and then this just sort of backs up and builds on that. However, also if they wanted to cut parts of the article, they could just cut from the bottom up if they needed more space. The diamond perspective, we'll look at how that looks in a little bit. It typically has 4 parts: the anecdote lead, statement of theme, body of the story, and then the conclusion. So the article can go from, say, here we are at the beginning of the article with the local perspective on something that happens. It can go out to the global perspective and then back to the local, right? And so the story always ends where it started, right? So if you start in an event that took place in the town, say something that's in the news right now is polluted water. If you were talking about water in our town, then you could look at the different states and places around the country that have had water issues, and then back to what the town is going to do about water in our town. So you see, it allows for the development of a sort of a bigger story. All right. So the old nursery rhyme here provides a simple illustration. Let's see, of the 4 elements. Construction. Jack and Jill went up the hill. That's the anecdote. That's the story, right? To fetch a pail of water. That's the statement of theme, right? Jack fell down and broke his crown. So that's the body, the story itself. That's what happened, right? That's what the story is all about. And Jill came tumbling after. That's the conclusion. So you can kind of get the scene. Right, here's the story. This is where it opens. They're going up the hill. What are they doing? They're fetching a pail of water. That's the statement of theme, right? That's the purpose for what this is about. Jack fell down, that's the story itself, and then Jill came tumbling after, and that's how it concludes. Right, entertaining beginning, description of setting, building of suspense or anticipation leading to the main event. The main event, show the action frame by frame, stretching it out. So obviously we're talking about paragraph by paragraph. Action leading to the solution or the problem, conclusion of the adventure, extending, ending, memories, decisions, feelings, and wishes. So if we start local, we end local, right? And then so everything else in between helps flesh out that story depending on where you go. You also can see how this serves to follow the plot structure of a narrative, right? So you've got the beginning of the story, the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. So it follows a similar story. And because this is used with a feature article, you have time to develop a story based on what you're researching and what you're doing. And all feature articles should have research involved. Okay, so continued. So we've got this tick-tock paragraph. This is after you've written your lead. I know we took a little break from discussion of the structure, but after you've got your lead, then we get into so what do we have so far? We've got headline, byline with the subhead, the lead. We looked at the different leads. Then you've got a tick-tock paragraph. This takes the audience back in time, perspective, showing them the bigger issue you intend to discuss. You need to provide the background to the story. Use time references. It was a long time ago that these are these transitions. Before the age of the computer, when he was a young soldier, before this issue became a problem several years ago, etc., etc. These are transitions that let your reader know that you're jumping back in time. and we're going to continue here. Expand the body with facts, statistics, personal viewpoints, subheadings, optional, opinions from authorities and experts, right? So that's where you flesh out the middle part of the story. Quotes and interviews, anecdotes and stories, specific names, places, dates, photographs, diagrams. That's the middle part of this. So you've started with your interesting lead, you grabbed your reader's attention, you've given us a little background, and then you get back to the story, right? In the middle, that's the bulkier part. And then you come to some sort of conclusion with the story. So that's essentially a feature article in a nutshell.